Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Harvard Center for International Development's Friday Speaker Series. I'm Yasmin Higo. I'm a PhD student at the Harvard Graduate School of Arts and Science and the Harvard School of Public Health, and a PhD affiliate here. And here at the CID, our mission is to build a thriving world for all. We work across the university with different researchers and practitioners to build a talent pool, international pool of talent, convene academic and practitioner networks, and deploy breakthrough research to answer today's most pressing challenges. We are so excited today about today's conversation on From Crisis to Action, Leadership Lessons from Paraguay's Finance Minister. Before we get started, just a couple of housekeeping rules. Please enjoy your lunch. All the items are composable. Please hold all questions to the end, and then I'll be walking around for the Q&A session. We are also recording today's session. However, the camera will just be positioned to look at the speaker and not at the audience. A CID team member, Miguel, will also be taking photos to share on our social media channels. So if you do not feel comfortable being on those photos, please reach out to any of the CID team members. And lastly, please make sure to subscribe to all the newsletters and social media channels of the Center for International Development. Without further ado, I'd like to briefly introduce our amazing speaker for today. Dr. Carlos Fernández Valdovinos is the Minister of Finance of the Republic of Paraguay, bringing decades of experience in macroeconomic policy, monetary stability, and financial sector development. He previously served as the governor and chief economist of the Central Bank of Paraguay, a board director at BSAA Bank, and held senior roles at the International Monetary Fund across the Western Hemisphere, European and African departments. He also served as a senior economist at the World Bank, acting as the country economist for Argentina, and he has represented Paraguay at the World Bank, IMF, IDB, and CAF. He holds a PhD in economics from the University of Chicago and a master in policy economics from the University of Illinois, and a bachelor in economics from the Federal University of Paraná in Brazil. He has taught at the National University of Asunción, the Catholic University of Paraguay, Georgetown University, and the University of San Andrés in Argentina, and the University of Chicago. Minister Fernández Valdovinos has published extensively on monetary policy and macroeconomic stability, and he has been recognized globally for his leadership, including being named Best Minister of the Year by The Banker in 2025 and Best Central Banker of the Year by Global Finance in multiple years. Thank you all for being here, and Minister Fernández Valdovinos, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you. Can you hear me now? Okay. First, it's a pleasure to be here back at Harvard. It's not the first time I'm here giving a speech, so it's always a pleasure. But even more, it's a pleasure for me because I'm coming back to do some kind of academics. I mean, one of the things I miss the most is the time I spent at the University of Chicago teaching at the Master of Public Policy there. That, of course, right now I cannot do it. So being a Minister of Finance is very difficult to be away for 10 weeks, as used to be the case when I was at the private sector. Now, probably if the presentation is going to be shown there, or how is that? Do we have the presentation there? Yeah, okay. I was scared. Always remember, this morning I was talking to Carolina, always expect the unexpected, meaning that probably there is a problem always. Somebody forgot to put the presentation, somebody forgot to put the volume on the microphone. So the first rule for you when you're going to do a presentation is expect the unexpected. So if I ask here, okay, you know something about Paraguay? Probably many people will say yes, they qualify for the World Cup. It's coming next year here. But it's a small country that did a lot recently, and right now probably is the shining star in a region that is very difficult to be in. That is Latin Americans and South American in particular. So the idea here is for you or for me to give you some introduction of what has been the recent history of Paraguay, on the economic part, of course. Because if you know something, this is the organization of the presentation, but this is our most recent achievement. We are investment grade. There are not so many countries that recently achieved being an investment grade. As a matter of fact, after this speech, I have to go and meet investor here in Boston because they buy a lot of our sovereign bonds, sorry. But this is my tweet. Of course, it's not like as popular as any tweet from Taylor Swift or whatever, but for Paraguay standard, more than 100,000 visualization is quite a lot for a country like in Paraguay. So this is my most famous tweet over there. But even though this was July 24, behind this, there is a lot. There is a lot. And let me give you an introduction of what has been that lot that Paraguay have been doing from a long time until today that we are investment grade. And at the end, I'm going to share with you some thoughts about being a policymaker. So I hope they find this. It's going to be an interesting discussion. The first thing that you have to know is that not all past times were good. I mean, we are investment grade, but that was not always the case. Behind any story or any successful story, there is a path. There is a race, but a race that is not a 100-meter race. It's a marathon. If I'm speaking to you today, it's because there is a path. And a path when I did a lot of things. I mean, you were kind enough to mention some of the stuff I was doing before coming here at Harvard to give a speech. In Paraguay, again, not always we were investment grade. On the contrary, if you look at, I don't want to go that back, but this is at the 90s, I mean, 35 years ago. And why I started here, because at the beginning, in 89, we finally achieved democracy over there after a 35-year dictatorship. So what was the starting point for democracy in Paraguay? Not a very nice situation. You have political instability still. I mean, even though the dictator was away, the army was still powerful, and there was a lot of controversial between the different people or political people who wanted to be in charge of the country. So there was a lot of political instability. On the financial system, there was a weak financial system regulation. I'm going to talk further on this later. And in general, lack of credibility, not only on the political part, but also on the economic part. And when you don't have credibility, there is no way you can do something. Credibility is crucial if you are a policymaker. Look at the numbers. This is a starting point. 2002, 10 years after. I'm going to talk about 2002 because this was the beginning of what is the recent success of Paraguay. Between the 90s and 2002, we're going to see what happened. Not many things, but not very many good things. But here is the starting point. GDP per capita was decreasing, poverty level was around more than 50% of the whole population, large fiscal deficit, very low international reserve. The treasury, we are investment grade today. We were on default at the time. So many things changed in 22, 23 years. So let me show you in Spanish first. These were the headlines on the newspaper. For you, Paraguay entered into default. There is no credibility. The president of the central bank admits government lacked enough money for December salaries. Salaries were paid with delay. Pension were paid with probably 40 or 45 days of delay. So this was probably the bottom of the story. A lot of economic problem back then. But then we achieved investment grade. But again, no easy, no fast. if you want to reach a goal, being that economic goal, political goal, personal goal, professional goal, you need to have something that is crucial. That is to maintain where you're going, to maintain the direction. You have to sustain the action that you're doing. So in 22 years, we were able to change what I was showing to what I was showing first, that is investment grade situation for Paraguay. Now, was not easy, as I mentioned, was challenging. Let me here enter into the history of the four main pillars for macroeconomic success in any country. For me, macroeconomic policy is like a table with four legs: monetary policy, fiscal policy, financial policy, and then the exchange rate policy. And you know what happened when the table is having like a weak leg? Everything is shaking. And whatever you put on top of the table is going to fall down. So the same happens in any economy. If you have any of these four legs not working properly, probably the end of the day result is going to be a failure in delivering sustainable growth, decreasing poverty, etc., etc. So let's see what's the story of Paraguay in these four legs. In 1980s, this is at the end of the dictatorship, you have the following situation. Inflation was increasing. The country developed a crazy exchange rate regime where you have multiple exchange rate, meaning prone to corruption. Because when you have like somebody can get this US dollar cheaper than what is at the market, probably somebody will benefit from that. So you have not one, two, or three, you have several different exchange rate regimes. And given that the exchange rate, the official exchange rate was totally in disequilibrium with respect to what was supposed to be the equilibrium exchange rate in the market, you have the following situation: international reserve going down. This happened in Paraguay in the 80s, happened in Venezuela recently, happened in Argentina recently. Whenever you try to play with unsustainable policies, at the end of the day, you're going to be in a crisis. And Paraguay was in a crisis at the end of the dictatorship. And as a matter of fact, this crisis was one of the factors that triggered the revolution that threw the dictator out of power in Paraguay, a big economic crisis. So rising inflation, multiple exchange rate, and declining international reserve. So with the new government, I mean, the new democracy, okay, what is the first thing to solve? One of these problems here: inflation, exchange rate regime. So the first reform that we did in Paraguay, I was too young back then, but I know the story, is to freely float the exchange rate. In 1992, we draw a new constitution with a crucial part for our recent success. In the constitution, not a law, in the constitution, the central bank independence was granted. So this was key for what is the recent story of Paraguay. The fact that we put into the constitution that the central bank have to be independent was crucial for what is the story of economics history of Paraguay. And then I'm gonna stop there, 92. I'm gonna talk about this 95 when we draw or we draft, we have a new draft for the central bank law. But again, the first things was attack inflation and exchange rate vulnerability back then. Now, if you remember, the 90s was the Washington consensus, okay? Low fiscal deficit, freely floating exchange rate, central bank independence, and something important, but you have to know how to do it. financial sector liberalization. The problem is back then that we focus only on, and let me tell you this because I was central bank governor, it's good to have financial sector liberalization. That could be good. But it's very bad if you have financial sector liberalization with no regulation. And that was the problem. Remember 4 legs. We attack one leg, inflation, second leg, exchange rate regime, but the third leg, financial sector, was weak because we liberalized and we didn't have good regulation back then. Result, crisis. Crisis in 95, 97, and 2002. You can see the number of financial institutions, almost 150 to less than 100 in the country. Another way to see what is the impact of the crisis, loans to GDP. That was not that high, but it was 25 and decreased to around 15% of GDP only. So basically the crisis destroyed the financial system in Paraguay. The cost is huge. This is only one paper saying or talking about 16% of GDP, the cost. Some other papers talk about 30 and even 50% of GDP, the cost of the financial crisis in the 90s in Paraguay. So what to do then? We need to do something on the financial sector. And we did. We reformed the laws. As I mentioned before, central bank charter was important because over there, we established a fundamental objective for the central bank that is not only to control inflation, also to control the health of the financial sector also. So that was important. And in 96, we passed a law, a new law on banks, finance company, and other credit institutions, where we put regulation at the same level of international standards. That was not the case before. So we did that reform in order to really put the financial regulation in good standard, good international standards. So far, 3 legs already with reform we were attacking. Now, we were happy with 3 legs, but we forgot one that is quite important also. Which one is that? Fiscal. We forgot that you can have a crisis arising from the fiscal. And what happened in the fiscal? This is a situation in the early 2000s. Remember the numbers I showed at the beginning with the bad situation of Paraguay? Well, the last leg that we solved was the fiscal. Why? Deficit around 3.5% of GDP could be small for any other country, but for Paraguay it's huge. It's huge. You cannot have like continuously 3% of GDP, especially at the beginning of the 2000s. Public sector debt, and I think they stop it here, but it's around 40, more than 40%, was 52 if you account for all of that. So 3 legs working, 1 leg not working. Again, a new crisis, and you remember the new crisis meant selected default for the country. So the last leg that we solved or we fixed was the fiscal part, and we implemented reforms. Which one? Example, in 2003, we agree with the IMF on a standby program that even though at the end we didn't withdraw any money from the IMF, was very important to put macroeconomic policy in good levels, in good standard. So we were able, thanks to the macroeconomic agreement with the IMF, to reduce the fiscal deficit, control a little bit better inflation, do some reforms that were important after that, and pass some laws that were important in order to really have a better and sound, a more sound fiscal policy. One of them is one reform that we need to do again 20 years after, that is the reform of the public sector pension system. And also we did a tax reform. That interesting enough, in Paraguay, we didn't do a tax reform to increase taxes. We did a tax rate. We did a tax reform to decrease tax rates. You know what is the name, the famous name of the curve? Talking that when you increase too much, nobody pays. And if you, Laffer curve. So the Laffer curve. So in Paraguay, we applied the Laffer curve and we were right. We now have a system of 10 VAT tax, 10 corporate tax, and 10 personal income tax. And we're working with that. Used to be 30%. But right now we're getting more revenues than before. So it's not theoretical, this Laffer curve. Really is a fact, and Paraguay is a good example of that. But again, reforms for monetary, reforms for exchange rate regime, reforms for financial sector, reforms for the fiscal. All reforms necessary to put the table in good standing. And then after that, we can start really building the Paraguay we want and the Paraguay that we deserve, as we always say. So this is what happened to Paraguay recently since we finally fixed the 4 legs. The last reform, the fiscal, 2002, 2003. And look at the performance of the country. Whenever you compare, it's much better than the region. Average during this time, between 2003 and 2022, for Paraguay, 3.7% economic growth rate, more than what the region was growing, that is 2.5%. Of course, there is a lot of story here. For the region, it was very easy to grow at the beginning of the 2000s. Why? Because of the boom in commodity prices. So it was very easy. The main achievement of Paraguay is that Paraguay was able to continue to grow very strongly, even after the boom of the commodity prices, even after the pandemic. We're going to see most recent numbers. But again, since we fixed the 4 legs with different reforms, we're able to really outperform the region. Inflation lower than the region, loans to GDP, remember, almost 15%, right now is around 50%, so we have a healthy financial sector right now. Fiscal deficit, around, of course, this is the pandemic, everyone happened that, but the difference between Paraguay and the region is that we are able to really converge against to a maximum deficit of 1.5%, established in our Fiscal Responsibility Law. So the results were good for Paraguay. Once you fix the legs, you are going to be able to deliver strong economic performance. And of course, one thing that is important is a never-ending story, a never-ending race. We did many reforms since the 90s, and we continue to do reforms right now. I mean, right now is between 2000, let me tell you, between 2013 and 2018, because back then I was governor of the central bank. There is always way to fine-tune the policy you're doing. There is always a way to fine-tune the laws that you have. And for that, you continue to do, or you have to continue to do reforms. What reforms, for example? Central bank changed the way the central bank do monetary policy, adopted inflation targeting regime in 2015. We did also changes in the central bank law and the banking law. Remember that I mentioned before, in the 90s, we passed laws regarding the two things, and now we have to update it because regulation change all the time. So you need to adapt the law in order to keep it. You don't want the leg to start weakening again. So you have to continually treat the different legs in order to update, to strengthen the leg in order to continue to build the economy on top. In 2013, we passed the Fiscal Responsibility Law. Again, another strengthening of fiscal policy. So reform is something that you will have to do always. And this is the most recent. This is since the beginning of this government, that is August 2023. Same results. If you compare, probably here, there is not much different, especially at the beginning with respect to Latin America. But here, you start seeing a lot of difference. Average for Paraguay economic growth, almost 5%. For LAC, 2.4. Double of what the region is performing. And even the world is growing less than Paraguay in the last 3 years. So it's a continuous race. You have to continue to do the reforms, to do things in order to keep your economy competitive. Inflation lower than in LAC, fiscal deficit, this is something I mentioned. Everyone went into a deficit due to the pandemic, but we are converging to the limit established in the Fiscal Responsibility Law, 1.5%, and look at Latin America. Trying to converge, not much successful, and then opening up the gap again. And of course, everything is related. Higher deficit, higher inflation, what is going to happen to growth? It's going to be bad. It's going to be weak. And we understood that. So today we follow the same path as before. We learn. Was difficult, but we were able to learn. And we learned that you have to think on today and you have to think on the future. And the only way to think about that is doing the reforms. Remember, at the beginning was reforms, then was reform again, and right now we're doing the reforms. These are the laws we passed since August 2023, 20 reforms enacted in law. I mean, this was not easy. I mean, we're not talking here about a decree. We are talking here about working with Congress in order to pass laws. And you have laws or reforms that are going to be important for today. For example, I'm Minister of Economy and Finance. The institution used to be Ministry of Finance only. We changed that back in 2023. Creation of the Minister of Economy and Finance. It's one of the reforms we did. The other one is regarding revenues. We create a new entity because it used to be the case that revenues, fiscal revenues, came in two different institutions, totally separate, isolated, where you have two bosses that didn't talk to each other. What happened then? Bad, nothing. They don't talk, they don't get a revenue. We merged the institution, we create something called the NEAT, that is the National Direction of Taxes. And right now it's working. We remember that our fiscal is 10-10-10. We're getting around a little bit less than 10% of GDP on fiscal and tax revenues. Right after the reforms, in 2 years, we are already at 11.5% of GDP in tax revenue. It's 1.5% of GDP more. It's a lot. It's a lot because even in an IMF program, the big reforms really are thinking about probably getting 1% more of fiscal revenues. 1%. We got 1.5% more. 1.5% of GDP more on tax revenue here. So these are all the reforms. But again, reforms. You need to keep moving, maintaining the machinery in order to do. And why is that? Because we want GDP to grow, not because we want to have a good number in the IMF report, World Bank report, IDB report, because the credit rating agency is going to price Paraguay. No, we want growth because that will create employment, that will create more investment, and that will give more opportunity for the people. Remember, you're doing policy because of the people. You are not doing policy because you want to receive award. I mean, I was lucky enough to receive some awards, but I'm not doing policy for that. We are thinking always on the people. A good policy is the one that reach the people, not the one that only reach a good publication. This is what is important is the people. So behind these good macroeconomic numbers, we can show also good numbers on some social indicators. Of course, again, never end the story. There is no government that will finish the job, but the more you run, the better for the people. And let me show you what happened to Paraguay recently, thanks to good policy, thanks to good reforms, good policy that as a result has good macroeconomic indicator. What about the micro part? Micro part, look at Paraguay and Latin America. So we started at 100 both in the 2000. We started both growing very fast. Why? What's the name here? Commodity boom. Very easy for both to grow. But the success of Paraguay is that Paraguay continued to grow after the commodity boom. I was in a seminar with Andres Velasco from LSE, and you have to read the new book. He called the London Consensus or something like that. But anyway, he was mentioning, and I agree, there is no example of a country around the world or along the history where the country was able to really decrease poverty rates without improving GDP per capita. So it's not everything, but it's a necessary condition for you to grow, for you to improve GDP per capita in order to see this improvement. Remember I mentioned Paraguay with more than 50% poverty rates back in the 2000? Well, last year was only 20, still high, but it's less than half. And probably this year is going to be even lower because we're growing strongly and we are creating more jobs. Gini coefficient inequality also decreased, meaning more equal distribution of income also. Unemployment rate, the last number, the lowest historically. So good policy at the end of the day, if you continue, finally reach the people if you're doing good policy. This is labor market condition. You can see, okay, this is the pandemic, but again, especially recently, we start to see more people going into the job market and having an employment. The earning, this is it's not in US dollar, it's in guaraníes, but the same, I mean, it's the same idea. Wages, average wages also are increasing. You may say, okay, most of the employment is only because Paraguay is an agricultural economy and you're doing well over there. No, we're doing everywhere well. This is the non-farming employment increasing also. So this part is the part that is important for policy. At the end of the day, you do good things on the macro, you really have good results on the micro for the people. Remember this part, increasing GDP per capita, you lower poverty rates. And in the meantime, it's not possible because some people are in bad condition or unfavorable conditions. They're not able to go. I mean, a guy of 80 years old is going to go into the labor market. So don't forget those who are not going to be able to enjoy the benefits of the increase in economic growth. You need also to focus on those people. For that, let me tell you 3 different policies that we implemented since 2003. First, the Copora is a transfer, a well-targeted transfer. This is a transfer of money for poor people, but you have to be careful here because when you give money to the people, you are taking away the incentive of the people to work. So you have to do a balance, has to be a temporary. And politically, many countries in the region use this in order to gain election, only for that. But in any case, it's a good way to really decrease the poverty levels in the country for those who are not able to get a job for any reason. Second, senior citizen pension. We were able to pass a law where there is a transfer also for those 65 years or older. We started with the oldest people, and right now I think people that are older than 71 years old, they're receiving the transfer. Again, you have to be careful. Small amount enough to give some help to those people, but not big enough in order to create a big fiscal deficit or to create bad incentive for the people. And the third one, that is, this is the most important policy that we implemented. Something that is good for the present, but is going to be more important for the future. Every day in public school, more than 1 million children receive 3 meals per day. 3 meals per day. Breakfast, lunch, and after lunch. Why? Because there is no way somebody will learn with the best teacher, with what program, with best whatever, if they're hungry. So you need to attack that part so the children will be concentrated on learning. So they're receiving 3 meals per year, more than 1 million. Just for you to give you an idea, Paraguay is a country with 6.5 million only. I mean, it's not like we are 300 million, 6.5. And we are giving 3 meals to more than 1 million children, 3 meals per day. This is going to be important in the future. Of course, you can see here, it's quite expensive. But anyway, we decided to really target 4 areas: education, health, security, and the social safety net. That is this one, including this transfer. So these are the most important social programs that complement the fact that we are growing in order to create employment. But for those that are left behind for any reason, we do have the social programs also in Paraguay. Now, this is a funny part for me. I talk a lot on numbers, numbers, numbers. But at the end of the speech, I wanted to give you some thoughts on lessons that I learned over my career. Because I was lucky enough to be in many parts of the recent economic history of Paraguay. For example, I was the chief economist of the central bank when we signed the standby agreement with the IMF. So I was in charge of negotiating with the IMF. So I know the beginning of the recent success of economic history in Paraguay. And of course, I know something about the crisis, in financial crisis before that. But as a policymaker, I was lucky enough to be in decision positions since the beginning of the recent history of Paraguay. First lesson is that you need to plan. I mean, very basic. You need to plan. You need to know what is important for the short run and what is important for the long run. You cannot concentrate only in the short run. You need to have both views. It's not easy to do that. Sometimes, as the people say, politicians always think on the next election and not on the next generation. But you, as a policymaker, you have to do both things. Remember the 20 different reforms? Some reforms, we're not going to see any results. We're going to see the results only in the future. Some other reforms, we are seeing the results right away, like the creation of the DENIT or the creation of the MEF. But some others we are not going to see. But you have to think about short run and long run. you want to do many things. You want to do everything always when you're in government. You cannot do anything, everything. A country is a house that have zillions and zillions of bricks. Probably you're going to put some bricks, many bricks, a lot of bricks, but you're not going to be able to finish the house. There is going to be always some duty left when you leave. You have to understand that. So whenever you're doing that, choose your battles wisely. You cannot do everything. There is, and on reforms especially, you have to choose which one you want to pass. There are going to be many reforms left aside, but you cannot do everything. So you need to choose your battles wisely. Important, when you go and sit, you have to have a plan. You have to have your goals, goals that are measurable. If you go and if you look at my speech when uh, I was sworn, no, I was not sworn, but when I started as a central bank governor or as a minister of finance, I put during my speech the four things, the five things, the six things that I want to do. Clearly, of course, we did more than that, but at least you have to have a plan. Like when I was central bank government, I talked about modernization of the inflation targeted regime, and we were able to reduce the inflation target of Paraguay from 5% to 4% gradually. I talk about modernization of the or strengthening of the financial sector, and what was the meaning that I have to change the law. And remember that we changed the law recently, central bank law and the financial sector law. If you look at the Minister of Finance speech that I gave the first day was about reforms for the pension system. We create the superintendency of pension in Paraguay. So in a sense, you have to have the goals clearly, because otherwise, if you say something very ambitious or very wide, you're not going to achieve. I mean, what is the word improve meaning many things? But when you say improve, you have to complement okay, meaning I'm going to reduce the central bank target or I'm going to pass this law. So you have to be clear really on what is your goal. Plans go awry, so you need to adapt. Remember Darwin, it's not the most powerful species that survive. The species that survive is the one that adapt better to new conditions. So there's always something will go wrong, and you need to adapt your plan for that. So be able to do that. And finally, since we're talking about reforms, idea from the technical level, guys, you're working in a society that is democratic, that you have Congress, there is a political cycle. You cannot go the first day in office as the way you go the last day in office. Last day of office, nobody will open even the door or answer the phone. You have to understand the political cycles when you are a policymaker. So when planning, take the political cycle into account. Now, reforms are possible because of me? No, because I have a good team. I do have a good team. Whenever the people are asking, you are doing, no, I'm not doing. It's my team who is doing. And actually, you have to be smart enough in order to really deliver. I mean, not deliver, delegate. Delegate, because otherwise, if you are on a day-to-day and you're doing the picky nitty, you're not going to do anything. You have to do the plan, other people have to implement. I always say, I don't know how you're going to do it, but you have to do it. Do it. So you have to lead people and you have to manage people. Important part of the policymaker is to manage the people. Teacher help. I have a PhD in economics. This is fully academics, but they're not enough. Sometimes leadership goes beyond academics. I respect all the people who do academics, but when you're a policymaker, you are not anymore a professor. I always mention to the people who did a PhD at the central bank, okay, you have a PhD, congratulations. Very nice. You want to publish a paper in the most famous journal. Perfect. But I need to know what to do with monetary policy for this week. It's a different need. And you really need to think about real life, not only on the academic. Academic helps you, but then something could happen. There is urgency and you need to deliver. So academic is good, but leadership sometimes goes beyond academic. Communication is crucial. As I mentioned, I don't know how you're going to do it, but do it. But they know what they need to do. You have to communicate clearly, not only to your team. Also, as a policymaker, you need to communicate to the people, to citizens. There is no way that you can be a good policymaker if you never give an interview to journals, to the TV, to radio station. When you're a policymaker, you have to be out. There is a balance, because if you are too often, they're going to say, there is in Paraguay some people who are saying some ministers are selfie ministers because they're taking selfies every time and publishing the social media. That is not the right way. You have to balance how much you're going to appear in the media, why you're going to appear, but you have to appear. You have to communicate that. Especially for me, what's important to connect with people. When you go into government, it's very bureaucratic. There is a boss, the sub-boss, the sub-sub-boss, I mean, you never go. I hate that. And some people don't like that, but this is not my style. I try to connect to the people. I have an open door policy. And when I want something, I don't go, for example, at the central bank when I need something like a presentation like this. It's not that I'm going to the chief of staff that goes to the manager of economic study, that goes to the chief of department, that goes to the division chief, that goes to the section chief to finally go to the guy who actually did the presentation. We call the guy that did the presentation straight to my office. And we said to him, you have to do this, because, okay, they do this, but the idea beyond behind this is my idea, actually. They do this, but the idea is behind. So I want a straight communication with the people. It's very good for you to open the door. I mean, in a good sense. It's not like not like everyone can enter, but work with the people and go work directly with the people. That is a good idea. Working group, team synergy. People sometimes forget how important is sometimes to, I don't know, do a barbecue, go during Christmas and do a lottery of pan dulces. I don't know if you know the panettone. I mean, at least some signals that you are close to them, that you belong to the same working group. Is important for them to feel part of a team. Otherwise, they're not going to deliver. You have to make them feel part of a team. The other one was very important. If central banks are usually very conservative, being very conservative, seniority is quite important. So those who are very old think that they deserve more than those who are young. The problem is that sometimes you need young people and old people in different positions, but they complement each other. For example, when I was central bank governor, I always mentioned, well, to put the years, I mean, to put longevity, I was the one putting longevity. So I need younger people who are, in our sense, for older, crazy enough to say, let's go to Harvard to give a speech. And I say, are you crazy? Never a Paraguayan went to Harvard to give a speech. But we are going to do that. And we did that. And we went to Chicago, to Columbia. You need young people with crazy ideas or more radical ideas. And those, for me, was quite important during my time as a central bank, at the central bank, and also here to have young people, because they give you different perspective of what you can do, how you can achieve. But of course, a young guy, you cannot put, for example, in the unit of auctioning or contractors or whatever, where you can have many people giving you a trick, so it's going to be a scandal. So in some places you need old people with more experience. In some other places you need young people. They don't need to fight each other. They have to complement. But you have to work with both because they are going to give you different views on the job. And it's important to combine the generations. So bring generations together. Of course, important is for you to build up credibility. Otherwise, nobody trusts you. You can go on radio, on TV, nobody trusts you. Credibility is crucial. Remember the first slide, lack of credibility as a policymaker. Let me finish here. Yeah. Don't be afraid to be firm. Some people say that you're too firm. But you have to be, really. Consensus, this is important. Consensus is important. I mean, you have to talk and try to reach an agreement. But at the end of the day, somebody has to make a decision. And you are in charge. You have to make a decision. You cannot be forever discussing. At the end, you have to take a decision, stop discussion, and make a decision. And trust your intuition, especially when you're old. When you're young, probably you need to be more careful. But when you're old, there is no simple recipe. When to present a law, when to really say no, when to really say yes. Intuition sometimes is quite important. So successful policies are not valued until much later. A leader is a visionary. My personal goal is always to aim to build a better institution than the one I'm found in the first place. So we're not going to finish the job, but if you leave a better Paraguay than the one that we receive, we are doing a great job. So thank you very much.